Hey everyone. For a while now, I've been pretty aware how the pandemic has affected my book buying. And then I saw Gwen talk in her video about ARCs, a little bit about her book buying history. So the way her book buying changed. And I thought this was so interesting, I want to turn it into a tag. And Gwen said, go ahead. So I decided to come up with a tag which doesn't have any questions. It's more two questions that we want to answer. Basically, where did you get your books and how did you decide what to buy? And looking back through your life and your reading life and your book acquiring life and see how it changed there. You can divide it up however you want. I'm just going to ramble along. So basically, I grew up in a small town, Germany, and we had one bookshop, which unfortunately doesn't play a big role in my book buying because I didn't have money to buy books. When I grew up, I don't really remember acquiring books myself until I went to high school in 7th grade. I remember vividly that the little library was in the basement. There was one small room packed with books, and I was a customer from the first day on. I stayed in that school. Throughout my school years, the library expanded and moved upstairs into a bigger place and had more choices of books. And that's where I got my books mostly. Now, how did I choose books? I'm not one of those readers who can say I read all the classics because I didn't know what to read, because I didn't know about classics. I honestly had no idea about canon, about books you have to read, reading lists. I also didn't know about book tracking back then, which unfortunately means I have no idea what I read. I remember reading in class all the time. I remember picking up books from bookshelves, but I don't think I had any clue of what to read. I just went and got books. Sometimes we swapped among friends, we had ideas and told each other, hey, you have to read this, so recommendations. There's also been a very strange time of cheap teenage romance. We usually got them at the flea market and exchanged them. So I acquired a lot of things there as well. But mostly I relied on the library all through my teenage years. And I probably relied mostly on picking up things that looked interesting. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a huge cover buyer. And thinking about this tag and my book buying habits as a teenager, I realized that's where it comes from. I didn't have a clue of what to read. So I just read things that looked interesting, and I did that all my life. So after school, I went for a year to Boston as an au pair. That was the first time I had money, but I also had access to a lot more bookshops and only English books. So I switched my reading from only German to English, and I read the books that my host family had, but also went to Buck a Book. I loved that store. It was small, it had a lot of fantasy things with interesting covers, so I chose books from there. And I also remember that I picked up books that were recommended in TV shows or in other books. Maybe I picked up books towards films or films that were made into books or based on a book, things like that. So my selection of books and what to read was still rather weird. I chose what was on the shelves of my host family, and the books I bought had interesting covers or I heard about them somewhere. Still didn't know anything about canon. When I returned to Germany, I started studying teaching. I didn't move out of my small town. I still lived there and I still didn't have a lot of money. And I don't actually remember what I read in those years. I must have read something, but it probably was a lot of rereading, picking up things I heard about, maybe seen in the movies, like the strategies I had before. As you can tell, my book buying strategy has been random. And since I didn't really have that much money and I don't really remember our local town library at all, I don't know where I got my books in that 4-year span I studied teaching. Probably my brother's bookshelf. He always spent more money on books than I did, and he's a huge fantasy reader, so good choices there. But all of that changed when I moved to Hanover in 1999. I started studying English literature, and I was exposed to a reading list for the first time in my life that I actually cared about. So all of a sudden I had a huge backlog of classics that I feel I should have read, Most of them I still haven't read. But anyways, and I was exposed to a bigger city with more bookshops. Back then, when I moved here, we had a wonderful secondhand bookshop with English books and German books, huge selection, well organized, lovely stuff. I used to go there all the time. And they also had this, what a lot of used bookstores have, where you bring back books and you can take back new ones, so you don't have to spend so much money. And I did that a lot. My book choice was still, hey, I knew that author, or I heard of that book somewhere. I need this for university. This is a classic I should have read. So that's what I did a lot. I also went to one of the bigger bookstores we still had back then here in Hanover, who had a big selection of English books as well. Among them, a huge selection of Penguin classics. And they cost barely nothing. So they were about €2, €3, which is awesome when you want to buy books but don't have money and don't have time to read, which probably everyone who studies literature knows about. You want to buy books all the time, but you don't have money because you're a student and you have a reading list that's longer than anything you can ever manage. So I ended up buying a lot of cheap Penguin classics whenever I went in there. No matter if I needed them, if I wanted to read them, if I had time to read them, and some of them I still haven't read. Let's be honest there. Otherwise, I remember picking up books more and more by the cover. That I've become more and more of a cover buyer, that a lot of the books I bought in that store because of the cover. And a lot of them were awesome. I really liked them. So we're in the early 2000s. I'm more and more of an avid reader. I read more and more in English, and I discovered Amazon. Amazon in Germany used to ship books for free all the time. That is basically, I think, because books in Germany have the same price. So it doesn't matter where you buy your German books, they cost the same everywhere. Not for English books though. So I discovered that Amazon has a huge selection of English books, and they were cheaper than getting them in the store, and the store often didn't have them. So I started shopping Amazon, and I discovered this, people who have read this also read this function. And I love that. This helped me find a lot of books that I didn't know about, that I haven't heard about, but I liked. And I remember vividly, in 2006, I was on vacation and I had read all the recommendations. I was in a loop. Every book I read had the same books in a recommendation cycle, and I couldn't find anything else. Luckily, I was in the States at that time and could look at bookshops to expand my cover buying again, and bought books that weren't available in Germany that I didn't know about otherwise and didn't have access to. So that was very helpful. But whenever I wasn't in an English-speaking country where I had a huge selection of books I could buy, I was a little bit lost here in Germany, limited to the small selection of books in the bookstores and Amazon, where I didn't know how to look for books. I didn't know about book lists still. I didn't know about book blogs. YouTube was just starting then, and yeah, BookTube wasn't even around. So I kept doing what I was doing. I picked up physical books only with things I heard about, I saw that piqued my interest, books people have read. I was relying on physical stores and Amazon. And then I started to get into audiobooks a little bit. Very early on, when I got my first iPod, I think in 2007 or 2008, I discovered that you can listen to audiobooks on there, but I wasn't an avid audiobook reader back then. So I tried a few for exercise, for running, and it worked rather well, but I wasn't as into audiobooks. So I remember at one point canceling my Audible subscription because I wasn't using it. I don't know what was wrong with me there. My listening comprehension wasn't as good as it is now, and the selection wasn't as huge as it is nowadays. So I think it's understandable. I remember listening to all of Sherlock Holmes, and I think it took me a year. If you know how much I listen to audiobooks now, you have an idea how little I listen to audiobooks. So my reading up until 2010, 11 was mostly focused on physical books, books I heard about, and I didn't really have a clue on how to find different books. And then in 2011, I started booktubing. I started my channel randomly because I wanted to talk about books, but I still didn't know that there were other people. And as soon as I got to talking more and more to other people online about books, I discovered more books. I got into new genres, I got more and more recommendations, and my choice of books switched from I don't know what to get to I have more books I want to buy than I can ever read. And it mostly stayed the same. So BookTube definitely changed how I choose books because it opened up a whole new world of book choices and books I didn't know about. I hear about it a lot, so recommendations have increased. What has decreased is choosing by cover, buying books on a whim. I rarely have the chance to go to a bookstore. Since traveling is not an option, I can't go to an English-speaking country and travel or browse bookstores there. I miss going book shopping in London. You've seen a few hauls over the years where I come back with 20 to 30 books from London, which is basically me stocking up on books for a year, sort of. And I miss that. And in Hanover, the used bookstore I talked about doesn't exist anymore. They closed down years ago. The huge bookshop with the huge selection of English books, they closed down as well. The bookshops we have small English selections. The German section, there's one where there's basically no selection. It's 15 times the bestseller of the year, and I don't really do well with German bestsellers. The attraction of going to a bookstore here in Hanover has decreased so much that I don't even notice that we couldn't go for a year. And my book shopping especially has shifted more and more to digital. I don't really remember when I got my first Kindle app and the first Kindle, but I'm using that a lot right now. I put everything on a wish list, and when I want a new book or need a new book or feel like I want to read something, I have a huge wish list I can choose from. And the advantage of digital books, be it audiobooks or the Kindle, you have them immediately. So a lot of my book buying in this pandemic has been boring ebook reading, and audiobooks, they're never boring. They're always the same. But I have bought a lot less physical books, and I have been once to a bookstore this year, and I came back with a weird book. Yeah, well, I wanted to read a physical book, and it reminded me of how bad the selection or not suited to my reading the bookshops in town are. And I noticed again that I do a lot of book shopping when I'm abroad, when I'm traveling to England or to America, that I always plan in space for book shopping. I go to bookstores, I browse, I get ideas. Most of my cover buys still happen when I'm traveling, but what I'm usually buying now is things I heard about, recommended somewhere on some list somewhere, or I've seen on Instagram. Booktubers constantly fill up my wish list. So I never run out of books of what to read anymore. So you listened to me ramble on for a long time about where I get my books and how I chose my books. And I hope that wasn't boring and you were interested in it. And I hope you want to share this as well. As I haven't been doing tags a lot and I haven't been watching a lot of tags, I'm not really sure who's actually still doing tags. I definitely want to tag Gwen because she was so nice to inspire this tag. I also think Dane Cobain from Dane Reed still does tags. I want to tag him. Brian, I know you wanted to take a break, so don't feel any pressure, but I would love to hear your book buying history. Courtney from Pickles Reads, are you doing tags at the moment? Anyone who wants to do that, feel tagged. I'll leave the links to Gwen's videos and the channels I mentioned in the description. And if you're not doing videos, tell me in comments. Has your book buying changed? How is it influenced? Give me your history. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.